Even though England are 1-all up in the 5-match series that they're currently in India to be playing, there is expectedly a lot of debate about the style of play that they've employed to even have the series level after 2 tests. Bazball, as it has become colloquially known ever since head coach Brendan McCullum took over in that role and chose to steadily revolutionize the way that England play test cricket, is something that has, even since day one, divided a lot of opinion. It's led to many saying that it's the breath of fresh air test cricket needs. Others have said that test cricket is test cricket and you need to be playing it a certain way and you shouldn't be trying to alter the nature of it too much, and even if you try, it will come back to bite you, because that is the beauty of test cricket. So there is a clear there are clear sides that have been made as far as the whole Bazball debate is concerned, and one person who has in fact weighed in into this particular debate in England is former England batter Geoffrey Boycott. Now, of course, Boycott comes from an era where grinding it out was very much the norm, where batting long and getting big runs, the traditional test cricket way, let's say, was in fact absolutely glorified and not in fact, as is in some cases, vilified in today's day and age. So him saying what he is saying about Bazball, and believe me when I say there have been some absolutely stinging criticisms made, has to also be taken with a grain of salt, but it is worth discussing some of them regardless, because again, just looking at what he says, there are interesting points that are to be made which perhaps the England team could note and take forward with them in the series. The first thing he said that is that England have not in fact learned their lessons from the recent past. He references how it is that some poor batting saw them throw away test matches in both of the Ashes, in both of the first 2 test matches in the Ashes series, and he's saying that that is something that perhaps they needed to go and work on. In fact, this is what he said. He said that you would have thought England learned from giving away the Ashes. The gung-ho batting at Edgbaston and Lords gave 2 test matches away. Now that is something, of course, a lot of people have said, and of course that's not taking anything away from the way Australia performed in either of those tests, which was in fact magnificent. But in both tests there were clear elements of England kind of throwing the match away, whether it be in the first test, them absolutely stunning everyone with the declaration, then being unable to get Australia out, or in the second test being unable to chase with a lot of their batters going for the uber aggressive approach when not necessary, and therefore throwing away their wickets. So in that sense, I'd say Boycott's absolutely correct. Perhaps those lessons haven't been learned, but perhaps the mentality is that you play like that, come the circumstances, means that they're going to live by that sword and die by that sword. That being said, there are perhaps criticisms that he's made which are a lot more legitimate, and one of them being the nature of the attacking shot. He's out blaming it on T20 cricket. He says the T20 cricket seems to have gotten their heads and made them think that every ball must be scored off with an aggressive stroke, sweep, swipe, or cross-batted shot. And this is something, by the way, that even we had pointed out on our show, saying that look, England, it's one thing wanting to be aggressive, it's quite the other looking to be aggressive just for the sake of being aggressive. I mean, Joe Root's dismissal in the second innings, there was a shot that was by no stretch of the imagination on, yet he went for it anyway and then predictably got out. His wasn't the only kind of shot in that regard wherein you felt maybe he could have been a little bit more, let's say, patient and looked to bat longer. Now, no one's saying that you need to be scoring at strike rates of 20 and 30 in Test cricket, particularly in what were very good batting conditions so far in India, but you can still be, let's say, smart rather than throwing your wicket away, or as Boycott says, look to be so aggressive that every time you're playing an aggressive stroke, an aggressive sweep, a swipe, or worse still, a cross-batted shot. That's good sometimes, it's not quite good if that's your plan A, come what may. But perhaps the biggest reposit he gave was actually slamming the mentality or the idea of Bazball in itself. Now that's of course where it is you can say that debate will come in, although the point that he makes standalone, not necessarily very wrong. He said Bazball is great entertainment when it comes off, but once you believe in an ideal over substance, then you have lost the plot. And this part, very, very important. Bazball is entertaining when it comes off, but if you believe in an ideal over substance, that's when you have lost the plot. And this perhaps is something that maybe England need to be questioning themselves on a little bit. Are you so wedded to the idea of Bazball as a whole that you cannot let go and look to temper your attacking approach as and when the situation demands it? are you going to buy in so hard that you cannot possibly buy out and take a step back and say, no, perhaps we need to look and play situational cricket? Now, to be fair to the English team, they did play a fair bit of situational cricket in the first 2 tests. I mean, if you look at even the very good knock that Ollie Pope had in the first test at Hyderabad, it wasn't mindless slogging. Even in the second test, there were times when England were batting in a, let's say, attritional manner, even by their own standards. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily just mindless slogging, but at times their aggressive approach did end up being their undoing. And that's where sometimes you have to look and temper and maybe say, look, we know how to play aggressively, that's great, but what if in this circumstance it doesn't demand that we play aggressively, it demands that we play smart. That is the kind of balance that will need to be struck, because whilst an aggressive all-in mentality will definitely work in T20 cricket and might more often than not work in ODI cricket, in Test cricket it's a little impossible to sustain constantly. Whilst aggression is good, and aggressive nature is something that England do have when it comes to, let's say, their field settings, their bowling plans, and even their batting when it comes to them taking on the attack as and when necessary, that's great. You cannot confuse aggressiveness for stupidity and just look to attack every single ball. Now, whilst I do disagree with some of the points that Boycott made, in the sense that perhaps you have to know how aggressive to be and that aggression is fine, but tempered is necessary, and that is pretty much what he said. Perhaps England will heed that for the third test. We don't really know, but based on what you're hearing from them so far, that may not necessarily be the case. However, saying something publicly and then actually doing it or following up on that are two very different things. So assuming conditions do get, let's say, worse than they were in Vizag, or assuming they were much better and that therefore makes it easier for you to bat long and score big, you may perhaps see that change. For England's sake, they'll hope that, at least English fans will hope that they can make that change, because them potentially winning a test series in India might very well be dependent on it. But that's just my thought on things. What do you guys feel? Do you agree with Boycott? Do you think what he's saying makes sense? Or do you say, no, Bazball, ride or die, that has to be the approach? You can let us know that in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap that bell icon, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Don't forget to download the Sportstek app, and if you're already on the channel, well, go right ahead, check out some other videos we've done as well. For now though, from my side, it's goodbye.